Okay, welcome to our office hours for September. We need to let you know the meeting is being recorded so that we will post it to YouTube later in the week. So if you're ready, Dee Dee, I guess we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, today's topics. Substitute teachers in for IS in delivery of SDI. Universal testing accommodations. Section 2, specially designed phys ed. High schoolers who no longer qualified for alternate assessment taking end of course exams. Reevaluation when parent refused services. Rules on amending versus writing new IEP. Deciding to increase or reduce service minutes. And Dee Dee has a little thing over there to today's list, drink hot chocolate. And you can decide which of the other ones you want. I just want the day to be over. Sorry. Okay, Dee Dee, I think we're ready. I know we've had a few other people come into the audience, but I'm going to let Dee Dee take this part away.
Great, thanks, Helen. I did drop into the chat for those who entered later the link to our attendance form to make sure that you sign in so that you get credit. And as Helen said at the start of today's office hours, you probably know by now that we are required to do that by the department. And so we appreciate you signing in. And I will pop that in again.
Dee Dee,
Yep.
sorry to interrupt you, but Liz says she cannot hear anyone.
Can everyone else hear us? I don't know. We can hear each other, so not sure why that would be. I would say that might be something with Liz's computer. Can someone else verify if they can hear us?
I am able to hear you.
Okay, thank you. Liz, sorry, that's got to be a thing with your computer. So we'll do the best we can. And of course, you know that we're going to share this out. Once we're done, we'll put it up on YouTube. So sorry if you're having technical issues. We commiserate with you. It happens to all of us. So the first thing that we wanted to address is that we know that there were directors who were out at OAPSA when this got talked about. We also know, hearing from some of you, that there's been some conversation amongst directors and districts about the possibility of having subs in for ISs who are out, who can deliver SDI and all that goes along with that. So what we are going to share with you is exactly what was shared by the Office of Exceptional Children and the Office of Dispute Resolution at OAPSA. We asked a lot of clarifying questions, and we're going to tell you what we know as of right now. And then we're going to tell you what we think you should do with this information. What we always do, we try to give you the best guidance that we can, obviously. So what I want to tell you right now is what you see here on your screen under Education Degree Unlimited. I took this directly from OHID, from the department's site, that tells you the requirements for each education license. And so this information came directly off the website. So this license is not the same as the temporary non-bachelor's license that's out there for subs who do not have to have a college degree. That is not this. Just to be clear, I want to make sure that everybody understands that. This is for someone who has a post-secondary degree, so they've got a bachelor's or above in education. They can get the Education Degree Unlimited Substitute License. With that sub-license, they can teach unlimited days in any subject, in any grade level, and that does include intervention specialist areas. Now, right on the website, they have this note saying consult with your SPED staff, your legal counsel, to make sure that you are in compliance with federal and state SPED regulations and laws. There are limitations on the delivery of SDI for students with disabilities. And that's what we're going to talk about next, that got talked about at length with dispute resolution and with the Office of Exceptional Children. So here is what that looks like. So only that sub, that education degree unlimited license, that is the only substitute license that is allowable to cover for an intervention specialist unless the person actually has a license in special education. If they have an IS license, then obviously they can do that. Otherwise, this is the only sub license that allows a substitute to cover for an intervention specialist. They can sub for an IS for an extended period of time. Here's the kicker. They can deliver specially designed instruction only if the intervention specialist, who is the teacher of record, is out on leave, whether it's maternity leave, sick leave, personal leave, whatever it is. And because here's the reason, is that they are technically still serving as the teacher of record, even though they're out on leave. What they cannot do with this license is they cannot fill an open position. In other words, when you start off the school year and you have a special education staff position that is open, you cannot use this substitute for that. And the reason is that there is no teacher of record. So it's not like there's a teacher of record and this person is filling in for them. So you cannot fill an open position with someone with this sub license. You can only do it if you already had an intervention specialist and they are out of the building on some type of leave. Now, here's where Helen and I are going to give you our strong words of caution in utilizing this option. We are sure that you can well imagine that if you were to do this, certainly for any extended period of time, where you were having a non-degreed, well, they have a degree, but they don't have necessarily a degree in special education and they don't have an intervention specialist license. If you were having that person deliver specially designed instruction, our concern is that you are opening yourself up for a due process complaint by a parent who could demand compensatory services because they're going to say you weren't following what's on the child's IEP. Now, I will tell you that we all in the room, when we heard this, asked that very question. And it was stated multiple times that you do not owe the child compensatory services because SDI is allowable under this license. However, as I said, we are going to urge caution because it's easy to say that, but it could be a whole other issue when that actually goes into practice and parents start filing due process. So what we would say is we're giving you the information as it stands today, but we certainly would urge all of our LEAs to be very cautious in how they apply this allowance, I guess, is what we would like to say. So Helen, anything you want to add to that?
No, Dee Dee, I totally agree because we were both sitting at OAPSA talking back and forth with and like Dee Dee said, many questions were asked and everyone was told there would not be compensatory SDI. What I probably would say is some of your more savvy parents, and not knocking them at all, may question this, but this is what, like I said, was said by OAPSA and by DEW, OEC. I'm sorry,
Right.
I have to always throw in OEC.
Yeah. Thank you, Helen. Yeah, so that's really all we want to say about that. We've put everything on the slide. Like I said, the previous slide shows the exact language. I took it right off the website, so it's very clear who was eligible for that license. And again, we're not talking about someone who actually does have an intervention specialist license, obviously that changes things. So we're specifically talking about this. And again, this is totally separate from that emergency non-bachelor's sub-license that is allowable.
Right.
Whoops. Okay. So there we go.
Any questions there?
Okay, great.
Okay. Okay. Do universal accommodations for testing need to be listed in section 12 of the IEP? We are taking questions. We are putting on our slides questions that we received specifically from many of our LEAs. So this was a question. These are universal accommodations. So no, they don't need to be listed in section 12 of the IEP. However, they're allowable for all students with and without disabilities. They do not have to be documented in the IEP since they are available to everyone. It is not a compliance issue if they are listed. If you do put them in, it's okay. It's just unnecessary. All students should be offered any or all of the universal accommodations listed in the manual. I know some people do put this in section 12, they list them. It's kind of like, I'm afraid as an IS, if I don't list them, even though all students should be getting them, they may not receive the services. And I think Dee Dee and I discussed this a little bit about, this might be a conversation with the admin that, everybody gets the universal. But like I did say, it is not a compliance issue. But universal accommodations are for all kids with and without disabilities. Any questions there?
Thank you, Helen. Okay, the next
Yeah, Dee Dee,
question.
you have anything to add? Oh, go
No,
ahead.
I think Helen, you made a great point about you might, if it is a problem in your district, you might need to have a conversation with your building administrators because that shouldn't ever need to be listed on the IEP. Those should be made available to every student in the building. So I thank you, Helen, for bringing up that point about it might warrant a conversation if it's a problem in a district. So thank you. So the next question is about in section 2 under special factors, where it asks, does the child require specially designed physical education? Is that referring only to adaptive PE? And the answer is yes, it is. APE is technically specially designed instruction. I know that many districts place it under related services. That's not actually correct, but that's really not a big deal. I just have had a couple of districts ask me about this in the past couple of weeks. And my response was, way back in the day, I mistakenly put it under related services too. So as long as you've captured it and you've captured the need the student has, what the APE teacher is doing, and you've got the correct minutes and all of that, nobody is going to ding you because you have it under related services versus specially designed instruction. They would probably just make a note to tell you that that's where it goes. But knowing that it is technically specially designed instruction probably helps it make more sense for everyone as to why it's addressed in section 2, why it's being asked about there. So if the student actually requires adaptive PE, then yes, you would check yes in section 2. But if the student participates in the Gen Ed PE with accommodations or modifications, then you are marking no. And what we know often happens is that APE teachers might provide consultation the same way our physical therapists do to the physical education teacher. And that you would document under supports for school personnel, the same way you would for any other consult, just like you do for the gen ed teacher, for the CODAs and the physical therapy assistants, and paraprofessionals. You list all of those folks under support for personnel, support for school personnel, excuse me. So if you've got an APE teacher who is simply providing consultation, you would put them there. But if the student truly does get APE, then you're going to mark yes in section 2. So
Hey, Dee
hopefully,
Dee,
yep.
Abby asked a question about, we know there are minimal APE teachers. To clarify, a PT can provide consult to the PE teacher. Yes, they can. It happened way back in the day, when I was teaching. But it says marking yes would only be a separate class. And doesn't matter who the teacher is.
Right.
Yeah,
So
it's,
that's, yeah, great question, Abby. And yeah, you are
yes,
only marking yes in section 2 if it's a separate
if
class taught by
separate
an
class,
adaptive PE teacher.
PE.
But right, if you, because APE teachers are in short supply these days, if you are having your PT work with your gen ed physical education teacher to, make modifications and all of those things for your kiddos who need a little extra support, then you're just going to put that consult under support for school personnel. But yeah, you're only marking
Right.
yes in section 2 if it's truly adaptive PE. Otherwise, it's just either accommodating or modifying the general PE class, but they're still not being
Right.
taught by an adaptive PE teacher.
Right. Any more questions under that? Or did we answer your question? All right. Okay, Dee Dee, not hearing anything. You want to advance a slide? Okay. If a high school student who was previously taking alternate assessment no longer qualifies, must they take end of course exams? Can they be exempted? Yes, if they don't qualify for alternate assessment, even if they qualified previously, they can, yeah, they can go. We said this has been a while since this had come out, that, we had a lot of kids coming off of alternate assessment with the new crosswalk. And unfortunately, it was impacting some students who had been on alternate assessment. And we know once they get to high school and coming off, it's even going to be more difficult. But we had a couple different questions about this. And one of them was, if the student has already passed some of the alternate assessment areas, we're talking more so high school, you'd have to continue with alternate assessment since you cannot combine test types. So for instance, if you qualified a student for alternate assessment in 9th grade, 10th grade, and you started testing them and you gave them test, you gave them, they tested again, and whatever the scores, that doesn't make any difference. But you shouldn't then, by their senior year, I do have an email into the state to clarify, but it's not going to alternate assessment. It's going to test and graduation. I wouldn't think, I can't imagine why a senior, if he qualified all the way through, would all of a sudden not qualify for alternate assessment. And if he'd already taken all or part of the alternate assessment, you wouldn't put him on end of course. So that was just a very different question. If the student has already passed and did not qualify, okay, they need to take end of course. I talked about that. And you retest if they do not pass. And students can only be exempted from the consequences after retesting at least once. And we have talked about that too. And we're talking ELA and math. Students can pursue an alternative pathway for graduation in lieu of meeting testing scores. And I think many people know some of the alternative pathways. What I will say, if you are seeing kids struggling, I'd say by the 9th grade even, that they're failing and whatnot, if you're going to pursue an alternative pathway, You need to start it early, not their senior year. And it's not predetermination. You're looking just like with graduation plans, where's the kid, or even success plans? Is the kid failing main academic courses? And are we maybe looking at a alternative pathway? Because I'm going to tell you, some of these pathways, to get all the points you need, it may not happen in your junior and senior year. And we can talk about that more later, but those pathways do exist. I will say, for kids that are truly on alternate assessment, the ones that have met all the crosswalk, these are your most significant students. But I'm not going to say it can't happen, would say it might be very difficult for those students to be able to take an alternative pathway. Okay, I didn't see what was in the chat.
Yeah, thank you, Helen, for that good reminder about starting early on those alternate pathways, because you can't cram it all in your senior year. It's a process. So I appreciate you saying that. And then the next question is, what info do you use and consider to determine modifications to a curriculum for students who are not, who do not have intellectual disabilities and the most significant cognitive disabilities? And we get asked this a lot. And the fact is it is an individual team decision based on the needs of a student. It is allowable to have a modified curriculum for a student who is not being alternately assessed. Here is really the biggest thing to consider. You have to make sure that the student and the family understand the long-term consequences of that. Of when you modify a curriculum, then you are severely hampering the student's ability to access grade level content and to master all of the grade level content that would be necessary to pass end of course exams. So it definitely has an impact on the student's ability to pass those end of course exams. It can have, and it certainly would have an impact on the students' choices for post-secondary education and training, whether they're going to be able to get into college. So those are all things that have to be discussed as a team with the student and the family. Again, it is allowable, and you can do that. You can modify even in one content area if they have a significant deficit in math, for example. You can modify that. What we would urge districts to do is to consider ways that you could put accommodations and other supplemental aids and services in that would allow you to keep the student accessing all of that grade level content, the general ed curriculum, to the maximum extent possible. But there are times when there's a legitimate reason to provide modifications. You just want to be very judicious in how you do that and making sure that everyone understands sort of the long-term ramifications of making that choice. So hopefully that answers.
And oh no, go ahead, Dee Dee.
Oh, nope, I was done. Just hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, and I just wanted to clarify too, when we do that, and I would say I probably see this more in high school, maybe more so in maybe middle school, but we want to make sure whatever you're doing with modifications, and certainly I don't say that anybody would be doing this, you want things to be age appropriate. You're not, and anybody that's can't come to internal monitoring or anything always hears me say age appropriate. So you are still going towards the standards. And, like Dee Dee said too, we'd have you definitely look at progressions and skills from the extended standards, not using it. You're looking at entry points like Dee Dee said. So Okay, that's all I have to say about that, Dee Dee. I know Abby had put in something that she wants to ask, and maybe not necessarily about this, but after a recording, and that is fine. Okay.
Okay, thanks, Helen. So our next question is about what are the obligations of the district when you have done an initial evaluation, determined the student to be eligible for services, but the parents refuse services? So then what is your obligation for a 3-year reevaluation? And so what we would say is, technically under the letter of the law, you have met your obligation for child find. You do not need to reevaluate the student. We would always suggest that, you're making that good faith effort, that you at the very least send a prior written notice to the family and remind them that, the student was evaluated 3 years ago, that if they choose to, they can have a reevaluation done and consider whether they want the student to receive services if the student is found eligible. We certainly want to watch our language that we don't cross over into predetermination, but making sure they understand that option is there. And should the student be found eligible again, that they could opt to have services or not. But we're not saying like chase people down and, force them into that, because obviously you have met your obligation. But just because you do have knowledge that you have a student who did qualify as a student with a disability, just to show that, you've done your due diligence and made that good faith effort, it's not a bad idea to at least reach out with a prior written notice, to let the parents know that, hey, we're willing to evaluate again. So hopefully that answers that question. That's pretty straightforward. Any questions about that? Okay. Okay. So the next question is, and we get this a lot too, that when you have a student transfer in and you are receiving their records, we're often asked, how do you decide whether you're going to amend an IEP or just write a new one? When the IEP you're not satisfied with, there are non-compliance things, or you don't find it appropriate for the student. There is not specific guidance or a rule on how you make that decision. It really is a team decision. But what we would say are use these general guidelines of looking at the ETR and then determining if the IEP in question is actually going to sufficiently address the student's needs. Will it help the student access and make progress in the general curriculum? Does it address all of the needs that were identified in the ETR? If not, is there a reason? Is there a prioritization of needs? Does it make sense? Does it seem that it is going to appropriately serve the student? If it's questionable, or if it seems like that's really out there, or it's really not doing that, then you probably want to rewrite the IEP. If it's a couple of little things that are, oh, well, this needs corrected to be compliant, or, now that we have the student here in a different setting, something isn't going to meet the student's needs as written, and you can change it with an amendment, then go ahead and do that. But as I said, there's really no rule or guidance around that. It really is looking at it in comparison to the ETR and deciding if it is appropriate to meet the student's needs. Okay, Helen, did you want to talk about this one?
Dee Dee, no, go ahead. I was muted.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, no problem.
Okay,
Another
wait,
thing that,
just a minute though. I do see in the chat, from Abby. We have been told you cannot amend a transfer. You either take it all or rewrite.
Okay, well, I will just say, unless something has changed, um, you can, when you adopt a record, you can then immediately amend it and put in an AIEP. So, yes, you do, when you transfer it, you do adopt it as it is, but you can immediately then amendment. So, first you do the transfer to get it into your system, and then you do an AIEP immediately after that to make any corrections that are necessary. And I know that districts have done that with no problem through EMIS. So I'm not sure why someone would have said that you can't do that. We will do some checking to see if there's something that we're not aware of. Thanks for bringing that up, but I'm as of what we know today, that's not accurate. From what we know, there's absolutely no reason why you wouldn't transfer the student's documents, and if the document is appropriate and it appropriately serves the student, but there's something small that needs tweaked, there would be no reason why you couldn't do that. But we will definitely investigate that further and get back to you. Is that satisfactory to everyone?
I think it is, Dee Dee, so I'm going to go ahead and let you do this slide.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. So another thing that we get asked very, very often is how do we make decisions around increasing or decreasing service delivery minutes, whether they are specially designed instruction by the teacher or their related service minutes. Everybody wants to know if there's a formula for that. Sort of the same way everybody wants to know if there's a formula for determining the amount of minutes to start with. And the answer is there's not a formula. But changing minutes actually is even a little bit easier, I think, than deciding on the amount of minutes when you're first writing the IEP, because then you really are doing your best estimating on the amount of minutes that it's going to take to help us allow a student to master a goal. So that's a little bit more difficult. When you're thinking about changing minutes, whether it's increasing or decreasing, that's actually a little bit easier because you're going to have data that supports the need for that change. So an example might be that a student has mastered goals and has really made a substantial improvement in their gross motor skills. Now the student is on target to reach age level skill status or is reaching an independent level. So the PT or the OT is going to have data to support a reduction in minutes to be able to show, the progress that the student has made, the greater level of independence that would warrant a reduction in minutes. Conversely, when there is no progress or very minimal progress, then you're going to have data that's going to support that, hey, maybe we need to increase the specially designed instruction, or we need to increase the related service minutes to target this skill that is being worked on. And so you have a justification for why you're making that decision. So again, we feel that that's actually a little bit easier than when you're kind of determining the minutes to start with. You're going to make those decisions solely based on the data that you have and either the student's lack of progress or the student's, progress or mastery of something. And one thing I will say that we always recommend is when you're thinking about a reduction in minutes, particularly for related service providers, it's always a best practice as opposed to just taking a student from getting, whatever their monthly minutes were from OT or PT or speech down to nothing at all, just wiping them off. What we would recommend is that you move to a reduction of minutes, and then when it's appropriate, move to consult so that you still have that therapist just checking in and, consulting with the general education teacher or the intervention specialist, monitoring the student's progress in case any barriers or obstacles do arise, and they're able to provide guidance and support for that, as opposed to, sort of a ripping off the Band-Aid and taking them from direct services to nothing being on the IEP at all. So we would always suggest that as a best practice.
I agree, Dee Dee. We have Liz says she still cannot hear anything. She has IT working on it, but she has a question. How do you propose service providers, I think, track SDI minutes?
That's a good question.
Yes.
We
And
know that every district does that differently.
right,
Um, we have shared in the past things that were provided from organizations like CASE
right,
at the federal level of SDI trackers. I've got a couple of examples of those. Those are things that some districts have created in-house, and they use Google Forms
right,
or, whatever they come up with. There is no specific one way to do that. There are people who do it all electronically. There are districts who do it, the sort of the old fashioned way, with a chart paper or, a clipboard or whatever it is. We can certainly send you out a couple of examples for SDI trackers. Again, I think the answer for that really would be there is no right or wrong way to do it. That is a local decision. What you want to make sure is that you do something, that you have some way to support that. And one of the other things that I would say is that our opinion would go a long way in holding up in court. And again, we don't like to think about that, but if you did find yourself in a litigious situation, if you have data from the student's IEP progress, if you've got hard data in your progress reports and they are thorough and appropriate and have been maintained, and you've got samples, all the things that you're supposed to have, that also then helps support your SDI tracking, because you wouldn't have that if somebody wasn't providing the SDI. So that's just one other piece of the puzzle that we would say also helps to tell that story that the SDI is being delivered. If you've got an abundance of data showing, the work that the intervention specialist is doing with the student, or even if the gen ed teacher is providing some of the direct delivery of that, you've got data to support that. But back to just the tracking of the SDI, no right or wrong way to do that. And when we get done today, happy to send that out in an email.
sorry. I think possibly, I'm not sure if she was trying to say service providers, but it would be the same thing. I know some service, if you contract out with some service providers, many of them may use exactly what the school district uses, but they may also have um, eh, something they use from their whoever you contract with, as far as, if you're talking service provider, but it would still be, as Dee Dee said, you'd have the data because they would have to do progress reporting on their goals and minutes. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you so much, Helen. Because I was thinking that the question was more about the classroom teachers as opposed to related service providers, but absolutely, Helen's right. And most related service providers have very specific tools that
Right.
they use, especially if they're doing Medicaid bill back. So
Exactly.
they are going to have very specific, tools and just protocols that they're following for that Medicaid billing back. So as Helen said, it might be if you're contracting out with a separate organization, they're going to have something. If it's in-house, you might check with other districts and look at what they're using. As I said, particularly because if they're doing Medicaid billing, then they've got very specific forms that they're using for that.
Yeah, and and maybe Liz wasn't, maybe it was just how it came across in the chat. Maybe she wasn't talking service providers for definitely, but most service providers, like Dee Dee said, they have very specific ways they track their minutes, for, they would, they have their own forms, let's put it that way. Whoops, okay, Dee Dee, questions? Okay, we're still being recorded, so we'll take a few minutes here and wait to see if anybody has any questions. I'll open up the chat. You can certainly unmute yourself or put it in the chat. And if no questions, then we will stop the recording. Okay, Dee Dee, not seeing anything in the chat nor hearing anybody unmute and ask a question. I would say we can say thank you to our audience and join us next month on November 6th at 9 a.m. Sign up at our events calendar. There you have it, live link. See you then. This recording will be available on your I can't speak, on your YouTube channel. Please forgive me. Okay, I think we can stop the recording now, Dee Dee.